Welcome everyone, Stealthy Sharon here, and I'm bringing you my review of Darkwood, just in time for the Halloween season. Acid Wizard Studio developed and fully released Darkwood in August of 2017. In this game, you play as a person trying to survive in a world taken over by a thick and deep-rooted forest. Within this forest are monsters and many unspeakable horrors that the player will need to navigate through by hunting for supplies, improving their gear, and defending themselves at night. I don't normally like playing survival games by myself, but I thought this game did a lot of things right as well as providing a very creepy atmosphere. Starting with the presentation, and probably more importantly, the perspective from which your character views the world around them, I can see this as being one of the reasons for playing or not playing this game. As you could probably tell from the footage already, the player can only directly see what is within their cone of vision. Anything outside of your character's peripherals or behind the character are not going to show up on screen unless you turn around. This is a stark difference from a lot of top-down games where you have a complete 360 view of everything around you. The large darkness outside of your sight and the game's environments makes for a rather dark game. However, I quickly got over this and never really felt that I couldn't tell what time it was just by the color within my cone of vision. Also, you can get a watch rather early on, so that helps with things. All that being said though, with your vision being greatly limited, relying on sound becomes just as important when determining your surroundings. And boy does this game have great sound design. Every sound seems meaningful to the ambience of the setting, or an early warning sign for the player to maybe avoid an area until they're ready to face whatever is lurking there in the darkness. At night, this is multiplied tenfold. Every little sound would make me tense up with anticipation of what was about to happen. Every good horror game needs an excellent sound design, and Darkwood has it in spades. Starting with the prologue, the game has you play a doctor desperate to escape his situation. After some exploration, the doctor comes across this unconscious man that he brings back to his house. Naturally, you assume that he's going to patch him back up, but no. Instead, he's sure that this man knows how to escape this arboreal hell. All of a sudden, you find yourself playing the prisoner trying to escape from the doctor's house. I felt this prologue did a good job to subvert expectations and also show just what kind of world the player is getting into. After the prologue, the player's character wakes up in a rundown abandoned building that serves as their first base. From there, they uncover notes and journal entries which progress the story and provide more explanation as to what's going on. The player also meets with other characters and has to decide who they can trust or not. The decisions the player makes may have consequences later on in the story, which I thought was pretty cool because most horror games are fairly linear as far as the story design goes. There are even multiple endings that you could reach through different means, with one of them being the true ending and all the big discoveries it entails. However, the story really only reveals as much as you actually dig for it. I think you can get a broad idea of what is happening, but you won't really have a clear picture without a bit more exploration than what might be necessary to progress. And even then, there is still a decent amount of ambiguity that allows the player to make their own conclusions as to what is really going on. I usually don't like things that are too ambiguous, but I felt this was done well. Although, that could be something other players might not find enjoyable. As you could probably already guess, the gameplay loop runs something like this. During the day, you explore your surroundings and scavenge for supplies. Then at night, you use what you gather to defend your base and work to your overarching larger goals. Exploration is an important factor in survival games, but I think it's doubly so in Darkwood. That's because you're not doing menial tasks like cutting trees for wood, but instead you need to hunt around for things to take. Items don't respawn, so you're constantly needing to go further and further from your base to find more resources. There isn't anything like a hunger or thirst meter, but there is a crafting system, and you'll be using that a lot to create new weapons, traps, or consumables. Also, you'll come across mushrooms and meat from enemies that you could cook in your oven to fill a dosage of some kind of drug. Each dosage gives you a buff or active ability at the cost of a negative debuff. As you take more doses, you'll experience these dream state hallucinations that add more to the narrative. As you travel, you'll come across many points of interest that will be marked on the map. When you consult the map, you can't see where you are unless you're at a particular point of interest. I thought this added to the game's atmosphere and forced the player to understand their surroundings. Although, while each of the game's areas are bigger than the last, I didn't think that any one of them were too big that you couldn't figure out where you were easily by just walking to a nearby marker. Eventually, you will receive a message telling you to return to your hideout before nightfall, and you essentially have to do this. If you get caught outside at night, then you'll be killed by a grue, or something like that. No idea what actually kills you. Once home, you have to wait out the night and hope the morning comes quickly. Some nights are relatively calm, but they'll ramp up and you'll get attacked frequently or have other creepy things happen in the middle of the night. But you're not completely at the mercy of RNG at night. You'll be able to build barricades, position furniture, and set traps to hinder the creatures trying to end your miserable existence. As you progress, you'll gain access to better melee weapons and guns, which will give you a greater chance of survival. You'll venture into new areas that provide a harder challenge as increasingly monstrous enemies assault you in your day and night escapades. I'll take this time to comment on the difficulty of the game. At the very start, the game will tell the player that it's unforgiving and won't hold your hand. However, that is relative to the difficulty you set it at. Playing at anything other than normal limits the number of lives that you have, with Nightmare being a permadeath mode. Personally, I think normal may have been too easy, which is what I did my playthrough on. I say this because closer to the end, I was taking more chances with my character, causing me to die more often. Consequences of death on normal are fairly minimal. You lose some of your stuff that you can go and retrieve, and if you happen to die at night, then you wake up the next morning with no reputation gain with the trader, which is the currency used to buy items. Those are obvious setbacks, but nothing that hinders you for long. I think playing on hard might offer a better challenge for those who want it, because every action will have to be thought out, and you'll need to prepare for each trip in the forest or each night's defense. All that being said, I don't think this game had an unfair difficulty spike at any time. If you're keeping up with your equipment and upgrading your workbench to craft new things, then a player should be able to hold their own with each new area they enter. Now, the biggest issue I had with the gameplay is inventory management. In the beginning, this isn't a big deal, as is usually the case in most survival games. As you progress, inventory management will start taking up a large portion of your time. Luckily, every morning time freezes until you step foot outside the bounds of your hideout. This gives you all the time you need to buy resources from the trader, repair barricades, and organize your storage. Also, except for the last area, moving all your items from one hideout to another in a different region is relatively painless because the game provides an NPC known as the Bike Man. He'll move all your stuff for a small price of a bottle of booze. Inventory management is at its worst when you're out exploring and you're carrying a full backpack. Personally, I always felt the need to drop what I was doing and head back to my base to dump my stuff and then go back to where I was at. This creates more downtime of traveling back and forth just for the sake of creating more room in your pack. I felt this was most annoying when I'd be in a creepy location with something disturbing or a scare just around the corner. But then I'd feel the need to leave because my pack was full, thus ruining the atmosphere. However, Darkwood alleviates this a bit with craftable upgrades the player can make to increase the size of their pack and hotbar. Although all this did was enable me to carry more equipment like extra guns or more healing items, so largely it felt like I always had about the same pack size. Bottom line, it was a minimal annoyance that didn't really detract too much from my enjoyment with the game though. And is this game worth it? I'd say definitely yes. This game sells at its retail price of $14.99 USD. I put about 23 hours into the game, and I can say I probably could have easily spent another 10 to 15 hours with it. The last couple areas I really sped through to get done with this review before Halloween. There were so many things that I could explore. Also, there were different choices I could make along with random placement of locations on a new playthrough that would easily add another 20 or so hours. I think the average player trying to take their time and engage with the majority of the content would probably take at least 25 to 30 hours. And if you're watching this before October 29th, then you could get the game for a super low price, just under $5. I'd say if you're interested in this game at all, then definitely pick it up for that. Overall, I thought Darkwood was a great survival horror experience. I was completely surprised that something top-down in 2D would be able to invoke the amount of fear I felt playing this game. I think if you can get over the game's perspective and some of the downsides of the survival genre, then this one really is a must-play game. I look forward to seeing what else Acid Wizard Studio comes up with in the future. What do you think of Darkwood? If you played it or are going to play it, let me know if you found it to be a scary game as much as I did. Also, if you liked what you saw, then please feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.